Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land and Facebook, and glad to have you with us tonight at Marketplace Church. My name is Ed Fidecaro. I'm filling in for Pastor Mark tonight because he was away at a wedding and couldn't get back in time. So, yeah, you're stuck with me. And at this point, I need to do my usual disclaimer. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of the staff or management of this church. So, anybody out there, anybody here, you got a gripe, come to me, don't come to Pastor Mark. He has no idea what I'm going to talk about. And you know what? That thought just struck me. He's asked Andrew and I and TK and some other people several times to fill in for him. And he never comes to you and says, okay, this is what I want you to talk about. He says, will you fill in? And you say, yeah. He says, okay, good. He doesn't even ask what you're going to talk about. Well, naive soul, isn't he? Tonight, guess what we're going to talk about? Politics. Yeah. Isn't politics a wonderful thing? Yeah, it's great. A couple of weeks ago, we had, the primaries. And you know what's interesting about that is about 10% of the eligible voters in the country actually turn out for primaries to choose the candidates for the parties who are going to run in the general election. So it really doesn't matter what percentage turns out in November. 10% of the people in this country decide who our politicians are going to be. Kind of a scary thought, isn't it? And you always get these arguments like, why should I vote? Well, it's kind of a good question, I guess. This whole voting thing started a long time ago, by 1776, when we declared our independence. 75% of the population of this country was native born. They considered themselves Americans. They didn't consider themselves British anymore. George Washington, Madison, Jefferson, Monroe, all those guys, they were all born here, most of them in Virginia. They fought a revolution. They formed a country, built a nation, wrote a constitution. All of those things on the idea that we are a Christian nation and that we have been divinely chosen to be America. George Washington was the first president, and in his farewell speech, he said he was afraid of political factions taking over the politics of the country. And he warned against political factions. Well, he no sooner retired from office than Adams and Jefferson were running for that position. And what did they do? They formed political factions. Now, they didn't go out like politicians do today and, start beating the drum about the other guy or any of this. They had newspapers do it for them back then. Back then, when Jefferson and Adams were running for president, they would actually hold up somewhere out of sight. And they wouldn't basically talk to anybody. They let their henchmen in the newspapers, throw the mud and start the scandals and all the stuff that goes on. We think the things that go on today are new or at least decades old. No, this started right from the beginning. Alexander Hamilton wanted a strong central government. Jefferson didn't. Hamilton wanted a federal bank. Jefferson didn't. Hamilton wanted to crown George Washington king. And these are the differences that have been with us right from the beginning. So what is politics? What does it mean? Nobody's polished up on their Greek? What's the matter here?
Running against the other.
Yeah, it's, the teacher knows, politica, Greek word for people, the people's business. That's what politics means. At least that's what it originally meant. Today it means parties and government and this and that and all of the stuff that we get inundated with. Causes a lot of people to become apathetic and think, why should I bother? Causes a lot of Christians to say, you know what? Politics is such a dirty business, I don't want any part of it. And I can kind of understand that sentiment. But at the end of the day, we're supposed to be the truth and the salt of the earth, or the salt and the light in our society. When we hold back our voice, when we stifle our voice, the only voices that are going to be heard are the voices of the unbelievers, the ungodly, people out to gain something for themselves. I think I read somewhere at one point there were 40 million unregistered voters in this country who are eligible to vote, and most of them are Christians. God established this country to be a Christian nation, and it's my belief that He expects us as Christians to take our stand for all of these issues that are out there, and I'm going to go through some of them today. We were talking earlier during prayer about these mass shootings that have been going on, and every time there's a mass shooting, what's the first thing that liberals say? Take the guns away. What's the conservative response? Guns don't kill people. Who does? People kill people. Oh. So you don't have to have a gun to kill people. Well, people are killed with tire irons, baseball bats, knives, all kinds of things. It doesn't ease the grief of the families of the victims, and it doesn't help lighten our mood when things like the mass shooting in Texas happen or in New York happen. But one thing we have to realize, Texas, one of the most lenient states in the union when it comes to gun control. New York, one of the strictest, where basically you can't get a gun. They both have their shares of violence and murder. And I looked up some stats this afternoon. However accurate they are, you never really know. In 2020, 45,000 deaths by homicide, or deaths by firearms, I'm sorry. 45,000. 13,600 of those were homicides. 21,000, there were 21,000 total homicides. So roughly 2/3 of those homicides were committed with firearms. But the majority of those 45,000 deaths by guns were suicides or accidents. How are we going to stop that? Yeah. At the end of the day, oh, and then another interesting statistic was of the remaining 13,600, whatever it was, that murders in this country every year with handguns, 80% are gang-related. So if you do not belong to a gang, chances are pretty good you're not going to get killed with a handgun. That's basically what that statistic says to me. And what do the politicians do? Every time we have a mass shooting like the one we had in Texas, it's all about the guns. And it's all about division, and it's all about name calling, and it's all about this side doesn't care. We have over 20,000 gun laws in this country, and it doesn't stop the killing. The only thing that's going to stop the killing is a change of heart. The only thing that's going to stop the killing is if we go back to the principles of God and listen to Him. What does He say? Thou shalt not kill. Actually, it says, thou shalt do no murder. We got to get that on people's hearts. Not all the politics, and it's the NRA, or it's the gun manufacturer, or whatever. We've got to deal with the mental issues that are going on in this country. So, I go to vote. How am I going to vote? That's what I titled my message tonight is, how should I vote? Do I want to vote for the guy that wants gun control, or do I want to vote for the guy that doesn't? That's a question that we got to ask ourselves. Other political issues. And again, politics just means people's business. We got a lot of issues that this country is divided over today. A few weeks ago, it became known that the Supreme Court is going to supposedly reverse Roe versus Wade. That when they finally announced their decision, probably towards the end of June, they're going to say Roe versus Wade is gone. And what do we get? We get tens of thousands of people who have gone crazy because their right to abortion has been taken away. Except it hasn't. All the Supreme Court decision means is that the decision will be made by the states. So if you're in California, you don't have to worry about your abortion rights being taken away. If you're in some place more conservative, some states may outlaw abortion totally, in which case that's for their state, not for anybody else. But the fundamental question becomes, what is abortion? Is it a woman's right? Is it a right to privacy? I often wondered about that during this whole COVID thing, when people had to get vaccinations, get this injection from Pfizer or whoever they get it from, or else they can't go to work or they can't go to school. And I'm like, whatever happened to my body, my choice? That's what we heard from the abortionists and the feminists for decades. because it's their decision, it's their medical decision. Okay? Then why do the rest of us have to be subjected to shots that we don't want and don't do any good and are actually probably more damaging than beneficial? You've got to ask yourselves those questions. What does God have to say about it? In Jeremiah 1:5, the Bible says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." That tells me that God assumes that unborn baby, that preborn baby, is a human being created by God. Not some alien mass of tissue in a woman's body. Not what so many people think it is today, is an inconvenience. It's not the right time. I don't want a family yet. But it's God's decision. Leviticus 18:21, "You shall not give any of your offspring to offer them to Moloch." Deuteronomy 18:10 says, "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire." Why did they do those things? Why did the Israelites, and God condemned them for it? Why did they practice child sacrifice? Yeah, they bought into other religions and thought that, well, if I make this sacrifice, I get what I want. That's basically it. So what's the difference between that and abortion? If I get this abortion, I get what I want. I don't have to have the inconvenience of a child. I don't have to worry about not being prepared for it. All the reasons that people can come up with for abortion. And let me make one thing clear right now. I don't blame women who have had abortions for doing that. For decades now, our society's been brainwashed into believing that that is just another acceptable medical procedure. A young girl finds herself pregnant. She's scared, she's confused, she doesn't know what to do. Her parents are going to kill her if they find out. All the different things that go through their mind. So where do they go? They go to Planned Parenthood or someplace like that for counseling. And they are counseled to get rid of this baby because it's just going to make your life easier. You're going to get what you want. You can go on to college. You can do this. You can get that job you want. You don't have to worry about getting fired from this position because you wound up pregnant. There's all these reasons. Back in 1973, when it was legalized, abortion was supposed to be safe and rare. We still have in this country today 1 million abortions a year. We're close to it. That's anything but rare. Back in 1973, it was because women are the victims of rape or incest, or they might die if they have if they continue this pregnancy. Very, very, very few of these abortions performed today have anything to do with that. It's all about choice. And we have to call it what God calls it. It's murder. So what do we do about that when we go to the ballot box? Who do we vote for? There's another issue that's always in front of us, the issue of homosexuality. And we have a lot of people, a large percentage of the people in this country, even though they're not gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or anything else, they think people have the right to be that if they want to. We know gay people, we know lesbians, we know we have a son that's transgender-ing. As a parent, am I going to go to him and say, "Oh, that's okay, son. You know, if that's the lifestyle you've chosen, and then you go right ahead. God won't mind, but God will mind." And I've tried to explain to people on numerous occasions, take God out of the equation. The average gay man's life expectancy is over 20 years less than a straight man. 10 times more likely to be alcoholics, 10 times more likely to be drug addicts, 10 times more likely to commit suicide. From a pure health point, if you have a loved one that is practicing that kind of lifestyle, shouldn't you at least warn them of the dangers? I don't understand how people can say, well, you're just a bigot, or you're a homophobe, or, you know, whatever other names they want to call me or people like me. I don't care. I don't care what they call me. I got to stand on what the Bible says. I was looking up some information on this today while I was writing this up. And I came across this one platform on Google there, and it said 5 Bible verses that say homosexuality is all right. And I went to those and I read them, and I'm like, this doesn't have anything to do with that. What are you talking about? And I looked up some other verses. And I want to read a little bit out of Romans chapter 1 that says, "Therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. Because of this, God gave them over to the shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind so that they would do what they ought not to be done." Pretty clear what God thinks about it. In Leviticus 18:22, you shall not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is an abomination. Leviticus 20:13, if there's a man who lies with a male as those who lie with a woman, both of them have committed a detestable act. They shall surely be put to death. Again, we've had people that will swear up and down there's absolutely nothing wrong with these lifestyles, except for the things I've already outlined from a practical sense and what God says about it. We can't choose morality for ourselves. It has to come from outside mankind. It has to come from God. He's the only one that can determine what's moral and what isn't. If Steve says one thing is moral and I say another thing is moral, and those two things conflict, who's right? If we both wind up at an intersection at the same time and decide, well, I'm going to do what I want to do, we could very well have a crash if we don't pay attention to the rules. You know, if we both say, I'm not stopping. There has to be a morality that comes from outside of us that applies to everybody. Otherwise, there's no such thing. It's all relative. It's all whatever anybody wants it to be. Which is why we have the kind of nation we have today. All these issues. Bible says God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Not the Heinz 57 variety that we have today. And believe it or not, there are at least that many. You know, we say LGBTQA plus whatever. I read somewhere there's actually 57 different genders that you can tick off on the job application if you want a job in New York City, including other. So, where have we gone? Where have we come from? Where are we going to? Those are some of the big issues. There's other issues that God has to speak on that we don't put so much weight on as we do those things. Murder and homosexuality and abortion and those kind of things. But the politicians have their opinion on all these things. And they're all out there trying to get their constituents to vote for them because of their stance on these things. But some other issues are, the issue of work. What about work? What does God say about work? Second Thessalonians 3:10 says, "For even when we were with you, we commanded you this, if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat." And yet, politicians, in order to garner votes, keep coming up with more and more and more programs for people who don't want to work. Since this whole COVID thing, there have been people sitting home, able-bodied people, making more money sitting at home than they could make if they went back to the job that they had before the lockdown. Does this make any sense?
From all those that have worked all our life.
Yeah. And the reality is that of all these people that are getting housing, getting EBT cards, getting free medical care, getting, transportation, you name it. Most of those people are able-bodied. The whole welfare system supposedly was intended to be a safety net, not a hammock. It was supposed to be for those who were disabled or for one situation or another couldn't work, had no family to take care of them, and it fell to society to take that responsibility. And that's the way it should be. Jesus says that. Take care of the widows and the orphans. Look out for those who are in need. The man who has no shoes, give him shoes. The man who has no clothes, give him clothes. The man who has no food, give him food. As Christians, that's our responsibility, not as government. And I'll say this right now. I've held this against the church ever since I became a Christian some 37 years ago. The way the church has abdicated its responsibility and just allowed government to do all of the things that we as the church are supposed to do. Families have done the same thing. Families, rather than take care of their own, take care of their aged parents or a disabled family member or whatever the situation might be, turn it over to the government. Let them handle it. Because the government does such a wonderful job of everything. Yeah. I've always felt like God created three institutions among man: family, church, and government. Each one has their own responsibilities. And if we neglect those responsibilities, God's not going to be happy with us. We can be as upset as we want to be about the government, if you're like me, who gets regularly upset with the government. But at the end of the day, as a society, we truly do get the government we deserve. It's the people we vote for, or the people that we allow to rule over us. And this is something that we've lost sight of. Those people are not rulers. They're representatives. Yep. The king is not the power. We are. All of you here, all of you out there, we're the power. But we've abdicated that power, and turned it over to a bunch of people who have no other interest in life other than making sure that once in office, they never have to leave. Some other things that don't get a whole lot of airtime, but are very apparent in our society today and becoming more and more apparent with each passing generation. Respect. We have raised generations of kids now that have been taught by the education system that they don't have to respect their parents or anybody else, that they are the only ones that are really important. I look at some of these kids today, and I think, man, if that was my kid, they'd get a size 9 shoe right where it hurts, I'll tell you. Because they have no respect for anybody. or anything. A lot of them don't even have any respect for life. Think about that. This 18-year-old kid that went and shot up that Texas schoolroom. You think he had any respect for life, for human life? Why? Could it be the fact that he knows that maybe it was only by the grace of God that he wasn't aborted? That 1 million babies a year are aborted? That's how much we value human life as a society? Is it any wonder some of these kids start getting the attitude that it doesn't matter what I do? I'm not going to have to answer to anybody. It's all about me. And I don't have to respect other people. The Bible says, so whatever you wish the others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. In other words, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It sounds so simple. Why can't we teach that to our kids? Why do we teach them that they are all important and they don't have to answer to anybody and that they deserve whatever they want for the sole reason that they exist? Why don't we teach them, do unto others as you would have them do unto you?
It's been twisted.
It is. That's
It's been twisted that I want you to let me do what I want to do, so I can let you do what you want to do.
yeah, it's okay. It's a trade-off, right? Right? You do whatever you want to do, and in return, I can do whatever I want to do, and everything will work out fine until your want clashes with my want. Then we got problems. Romans 12:10 says, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. I don't know about you guys, but I've was a truck driver for a lot of years. I've worked a lot of construction sites and things like that. And the last thing we did as co-workers was to honor each other. We would cut each other down. We would jibe and joke, and it was all in fun, of course, but that was the attitude, rather than one of honor. Wouldn't it be something if we could just honor each other? Wouldn't it be something if we could give up that issue that is the reason for our whole existence, like some of these people, whether it be abortion or homosexuality or gun control or whatever else it might be? Wouldn't it be something if you could just give up that one issue that you have pinned your life on and just say for a minute, you know what? Maybe somebody else has a position or an opinion that I haven't really considered. But we don't do that. We think it's my way or the highway. I'm always right, and everybody else is wrong. My wife has a plaque in our office that says, I don't need Google. My husband knows everything. See?
What can I say?
And that's what I said. What can I say?
We
When-
never know everything yet.
When you're right, you're right. She said just this morning about something. Oh, you're right again. And I said, yeah, I get so tired of being right. Okay. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for man. Proverbs 16:3, commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Proverbs 18:9, whatever is slack in his work is a brother. Oh, whoever is slack in his work is a brother to him who destroys. I kind of like that one. Whoever is slack in his work is a brother to one who destroys. Proverbs 14:23 says, in all toil there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. And as Paul told the Thessalonians, he who will not work, neither shall he eat. I got that mixed up somehow, didn't I? The last thing I wanted to address is responsibility. We talked about respect. The other thing we don't teach our kids anymore these days is being responsible. We don't, I know as parents, my wife and I are guilty of not demanding enough from our kids as they were grown. We've had discussions about this, and she doesn't always agree with me, but she'll get it right one of these days. We made it too easy on them. Go clean your room. 20 minutes later, go clean your room. 20 minutes later, go clean your room. 20 minutes later, I just cleaned the kid's room. It's what we do. A lot of parents do this. And we don't teach our kids to be responsible for their actions, for right and wrong, for doing chores, for just taking care of business. And it probably shouldn't be any wonder why so many kids these days are just lazy. They don't want to do anything but sit in front of a video game and sit there and push buttons all day. We've got to start teaching our kids responsibility. So with that in mind, who do I vote for? Galatians 6:4 and 5 says, but let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This is about being responsible for what you do, being responsible for your family. Joshua 3:1, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. We've got to be responsible for what we say and what we pass on to the next generation. Last thing I want to talk about is fear. Might not sound like a political issue, but fear is all around us. We are constantly being made fearful about what's going to happen. We've got a baby formula shortage. What are we going to do? We've got an oil shortage. What are we going to do? We've got to do something about COVID. So we locked the whole country down for a year, ruined the economy for absolutely no reason at all, because people were made fearful by a little troll of a fascist dictator, Anthony Fauci, the highest paid bureaucrat in the federal government, who knows nothing about nothing, and yet was able to dictate to an entire nation what we should do, how we should act. You got to wear your mask. Your mask doesn't do any good. You got to wear 2 masks. You got to wear 3 masks. You got to have 1 injection, 2, 3, 4, 5 it is now. Has any of it done any good? You know, at some point, we've got to start wondering how the experts get the title. And I, for myself, am getting pretty sick of it, because I see Melody and I know families who, I mean, literally people who have not been out of their house for going on 2 years. We do Meals on Wheels, and all of these elderly people have nothing to do but sit on their couch in front of their TV alone, because people are afraid to go near them. They don't want to give them COVID. They say that 2 of the biggest at-risk groups for getting the coronavirus are the elderly and the overweight. Well, I'm 73 and fat. Okay?
I had two COVID, Vic and I both had two
Okay.
COVID vaccines, and we both got it. So
There you go.
we're not getting any more.
I have not had the vaccine. I will not get the vaccine. People who, and I don't want to put fear into anybody, but half the people who are dying of COVID now have had 2 shots, a booster, and maybe another booster. And yeah, Jerry says she's not having any more shots. I tell everybody that. Don't do it. And don't be afraid. 98.9% of the people who get COVID survive. And the ones that don't are almost universally because of comorbidities, other things that are wrong with them. Most of the people who go into the hospital and have COVID and die,
We're sick already.
they don't die of COVID, they die with COVID. The COVID isn't what killed them. It's the respiratory disease, it's the heart disease, it's the liver disease, it's whatever it is that they've been dealing with for years that finally gets the best of them. But again, we've got people who are afraid to go out of their door because of fear of COVID. So, Chuck, I don't know where we are, but that's about all I got for tonight. I just want to say one more thing. I started this whole thing out asking the question, how should I vote? And it's a hard question to answer, but really there is one simple thing. vote for the person who most closely represents godly principles. And I know that in today's world, that might be a tough call. Which again is why we've got to get involved, not just in general elections, but in primaries, where we can decide, hey, if I'm a Republican, I can decide among these Republicans which one I want to support. Or if I'm a Democrat, I can decide among these Democrats which one I can support. And you have a better chance of finding somebody that has godlier principles than the rest. Nobody's going to be perfect. But we have got to, in this country, start living by godly principles, start talking about it. All the political correct garbage can be thrown out the window. Don't worry about what people are going to say. Speak the truth in love. And try and find politicians that are going to do the same. Tall order, but it's the only way we're going to change things, people. That's all I got, as Pastor Mark would say. So, Chuck, I'm signing off. Goodbye, YouTube, Facebook. If you want to be with us Sunday morning at 10:30, we'd love to have you. Much better to be here in person than to, and hear a real pastor than to sit and listen to some idiot like me. But, yeah, join us Sunday morning at 10:30. And